What's up everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to be building a Crested Gecko Vivarium for a client that met me through OfferUp. Since this is going to be the client's first time owning a Crested Gecko, they reached out to me to help them build their first Vivarium. For this Vivarium we have an 18 by 18 by 24 enclosure, which is going to be perfect for an adult sized gecko. For the drainage layer, we'll be using Leco balls, which is pretty much just clay beads. And on top of the Leco balls, we will be using a weed control fabric to separate the drainage layer and the substrate. As for the substrate, we have Reptisoil from ZooMed. We'll be mixing that with 1 part perlite and 1 part worm castings that I have in the backyard. As for the plants, I'll be throwing the names up on the screen as we plant them towards the end of the video, so you guys will see that. And for the background, we'll be using silicone so that the expanding foam has something to adhere to. We'll be using Great Stuff expanding foam, cork bark, and different parts of wood that we bought at a local store. And to make sure the whole ecosystem works without having to maintain it over time, we got some isopods and springtails. And for the isopods, we have powder orange and powder blues, maybe some zebras, and we'll definitely get some dairy cows in there. And to tie it all together, we will be putting an automatic sprinkler system so the client won't have to worry about watering at a set schedule. They could just put it on the timer and it'll go on its own. So first things first, we're going to go ahead and put silicone to the glass so that the expanding foam has something to adhere to, because it doesn't stick too well directly to the glass. We'll go ahead and let the silicone cure overnight, then we'll start on the expanding foam tomorrow. So it's been about 16 hours since we first put the silicone. As you can tell, it's completely cured and ready for expanding foam. But before I do that, I'm gonna lay out the cork bark and wood so I can get an idea of what I want it to look like. So I'm thinking this is kind of the design that I want to go with. I really like the idea of having a large tree-like background. We'll be using this cork bark as the center trunk. And at the top of that, we're gonna add some kind of plant that would like vine down. Maybe we could have a pothos or something that trails downwards along there so the gecko has something to climb on and also gives it some color. So this is pretty much what we have for day 2. We were able to get the back panel and the right panel done. I'm really liking all the positions of the flower pots. We'll be adding plenty of plants here to make this look really full. So now we're just gonna let this cure for the next day. Then we'll start working on this panel. By then we should have the plants. So it's been about a day since we set the expanding foam and it's completely cured. Now it's time to work on the left and final panel of the enclosure. First thing we're going to do is shave off this top layer of this ledge and get rid of this smooth texture on the bottom so we could put silicone and dress it with cocoa fiber and chunks of cork bark. Well, it's time for my least favorite part of this whole project. It's time to put silicone on the expanding foam. I hate this part because it smells awful. That's why I'm doing it outdoors with the mask on, but I know I'm gonna have to take breaks because it's so strong. We got our cocoa fiber mixed with worm castings and all that good stuff. We'll be putting that over the silicone. So, wish me luck. Alright, so now that the silicone is fully cured and dried up with the substrate and the moss on it, we finally have a clear look at the background and see what we have to work with. So far I'm pretty happy with the results. I'm just going to be touching up and adding some moss in certain spots I feel like needs more color. Then we'll start adding the drainage layer, which in our case is going to be Lego balls. Then finally I'll be adding the substrate on top of that. Alright, and now it's time to add the log, which will be the centerpiece of it all. Alright, so I think that's the best shape that I can get out of this log. I think it's really nice. I like how all three of the arms reach out to a different panel. It gives me like different quadrants and little sections to work with. So I could stick like the bromeliad in this section here and have it come through this side. Since it does connect all the sides, it allows the gecko to reach everywhere using just this one tree, which is super neat. I even added that little bridge up there. I'm not too sure if you guys saw that in the video, but just to add more connections so the gecko can roam freely. And now it's time to water this whole thing down. I'm going to scrape off all the excess paint and silicone, and we'll start adding some plants and see how it goes. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm going to be adding a pothos. This specific one is a golden pothos. I just love the variegation from the plant, and it adds some nice bright colors to the top of the vivarium. I'll be using some garden wire to pin down some of the stems to the expanding foam, and I could choose which direction the stems go, so it'll be very nice. So I don't know if the camera catches this, but there's some beautiful aerial roots coming out on the side right here. And I really like that because it kind of lines up with some of the holes that are already in this cork bark and the expanding foam down here. So all I really have to do is just point them in that direction, hold it down with the garden wire, and it'll grow beautifully right there. All I'm gonna do is just get a snip, just this big. There you go. Now we can go ahead and choose which direction we want it to go in now. Alright, so now that we got the golden pothos secured, once the aerial roots find a place to dig into, they're going to start pushing out more leaves, and they'll know which direction to grow into, which is going to be perfect. And there's the golden pothos. It's time to move on to the next cup. Since we already have plenty of green at the top, I think it's time to add some color. And with that, I'll be adding a Photonia, which is also known as the nerve plant. We'll be putting it in that flower pot in that corner right there to give it some nice color. Now we're just going to go ahead and fill in the pot, and there we go. So now we got the golden pothos and the Photonia. Making our way down into the vivarium, we have a pretty dark corner there. I still want to put a plant in there, but obviously it can't be anything that requires a lot of light. So we'll go ahead and look for something like a fern, which will survive very well in low light. And the plant that I'll be going with is the Boston fern or the rabbit's foot. I've used this in previous builds. These grow pretty long, so I think it'll be perfect to fill up that corner there. So let's go ahead and put that there. And I know it's kind of hard to tell right now, but once the fern grows, it'll fill up that entire corner and look beautiful. So far, here's the plants that we have. We have a golden pothos, a Photonia, and the rabbit's foot fern. All right, and the next section that we have to work with is that bottom left corner. I think that's a perfect opportunity to add something that can climb up the wall. And with that, I'll be going with an ivy. I'll go ahead and pin it down using the garden wire, and it should climb up. I use this in other builds. These do get pretty leggy, but since this is all starting relatively the same height, I think it should all grow together and fill that corner along with that wall nicely. Moving on to the right side of the wall, we do have one cup right there, but there is another one that's kind of tucked away in that corner as well. On this side, we'll be adding another Fittonia plant, except this one will be the white variant. It'll just add a little more color into this side of the wall since it is pretty bare. And just to give it some support, we'll be putting more garden wire just to hold it upright in the meantime while the roots recover. And in that corner, we're gonna need a plant that performs really well in darker, more like indirect light conditions. So I'll be going with this emerald peperonia. I'll go ahead and put that in the corner next to the fern. And since it is already kind of leggy, I think it'll be fine. If it was a little shorter, then I probably wouldn't put it in right away, but I think this will be fine since it is a little grown. So now that corner is completely filled up. So I think what I'm gonna do is add the main plant first, then I'll build the floor around it. The main plant is gonna be this beautiful white and pink bromeliad. So that's the bromeliad in its spot. I'll go ahead and touch up the leaves and point them in the direction that I want them to, but so far I'm pretty happy with that positioning. So next I'll be adding some plants in the background of the floor level. So there's the top-down view of the vivarium, and there's the front. So we added some texture to the forest floor. Since there are going to be isopods in the setup, we need to have some leaf litter. I'll probably be adding a little more. It's really up to the client. I'll ask the client, see if they want more, but I think it should have a little more for all the isopods going in here. But other than that, I'm very happy with the results. I think it came out beautifully. Now all we have to do is some final detailing, just make sure the vivarium's nice and clean and ready to go. But I really can't wait to see how it looks in a couple weeks. I'll make sure to get the progress pics and post it on some social media platform. But this looks amazing. And now that the isopods are in their new home, it's time to show you the final result.